And we have retired Air Marshal Sir Graham Stacey, and he's had an international career over many years as a UK Royal Air Force Regiment officer and served as Chief of Staff to NATO Transformation and is currently a member of the International Military Council on Climate and Security. And Sir Graham's also a member of our Global Leadership Council for UAMH. So Graham, you've had about 40 years, I think, in the military. But it would be great to really understand from you what impact you've seen that malnutrition and hunger has caused on security and stability.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that. I mean, my first thought would be to look at this very much holistically, and you know, there is clearly a moral case for what we're talking about, and you know, as I've travelled the globe, as many of us have, I mean, there is still a sense that being British is seen as being someone who understands values and fairness and things, and yet, you know, at the very core of what we're talking about is inherent unfairness. There is enough food in the world. It's just in the wrong places and going to the wrong people. So, you know, it's not as if that there isn't enough to go around. It's just we get it wrong. We share this little rock that we call a planet with lots of other people, and we're interconnected and we're linked. And there's no doubt that malnutrition and hunger and lack of food security causes instability, food riots, it causes wars, it causes terrorism, it causes and will increasingly cause mass migration. And all of these are going to impact us, whether we like it or not. And we can sit in our little bubble and pretend it's somewhere else. But through history, through culture, through trade links, through geography, I mean, we're part of that. And if we're part of it, then surely we've got to be part of the solution. There is no room for a bystander here. We've got to get in and be part of the solution. Otherwise, all of those things, the wars, the instability, the mass migration, they will appear on our doorstep eventually.
And we were talking earlier about kind of how people here in the UK kind of perceive the crises which we're seeing around the world. And, you know, we've heard from Wafaa and others about the important humanitarian and the moral reason to do it too. But I do think it's really important that people here in the UK buy into this and, you know, want to see it happening. And I completely agree with you that it's firmly in our national interest. But what would you say to people who see problems here in the UK, see people struggling, and how they should, why they should care?
Yeah, but it's not an either or. It can never be either or. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we have got problems at home. You know, I live in Kent, and like many of us around the room here, you know, food banks are booming. You know, it's absolutely madness to think in the country we live in that, you know, working people who are without work are queuing up for basic things like food from charity. But this can't be either or. It can't be, you know, look after us and the rest of the world will do its own thing. Because like I say, it's linked. You know, it will appear at our doorstep. So I don't see it. I think that question is almost a sort of avoiding the issue question, because it can't be either or. Yeah.
And I think, you know, the scale of the problem which we're seeing, as Wafaa said, you know, 1 in 2 children in Somalia as well, I think shows the absolute urgency of this action.
And maybe can I just delve into the security and instability a little bit very, very quickly, because I think we're also trapped in a vicious cycle. We all love virtuous circles, but this is a really vicious circle in that, you know, I've already mentioned, you know, a lack of food security, malnutrition, hunger. It causes instability, food riots, breakdown of law and order, ultimately wars, ultimately migration. But of course, all of that, you know, you can turn that on its head. And you know, food insecurity causes these problems. Wars, insecurity, and everything else causes food insecurity. And so we're trapped in this horrible circle that we need to break. And if it could get worse, then, you know, my very last point would be, you know, that there is no doubt that over history and still today, food and the ability to produce food is used as a weapon of war. And that, again, you know, United Nations in 2018 had a Security Council resolution, you know, pointing out that the abhorrence of using starvation as a weapon of war. But not much has changed. And a last thought to throw in there, in 1921, probably, I mean, I'm not a historian, but the first common use of the use of, and I'll get the quote exactly as it was, the first use of the phrase of food as a weapon was actually coined by a Soviet SAR in Ukraine. And that led to the death of 5-6 million Ukrainians. We seem to be back where we started in the world in some ways, so, and we've got to break it. Yeah,
and seeing that impact of the conflict there and what's that doing to food prices, absolutely. And I think, as you say about breaking the cycle, if we don't, it feels like if we don't come together and take action, we are just going to see this repeated and repeated, and something does really need to change. Thank you.